And I am one of the high school counselors here at Springfield High School. We do have our two other counselors out in the hallway. We have Charlene Moss, who is our counselor for grades 7 and 8, and Shelby Von Gunton, who is counselor for grades 9 and 10. Thank you for coming tonight on this cold night. We're here tonight to learn about College Credit Plus, which is a revamp of the old post-secondary enrollment options program. We have 3 speakers tonight. Our main speaker will be Greg Deringer from the University of Akron. He will touch on all of the rules, regulations around the CCP program from the state of Ohio, as well as touch on what Springfield has to offer through the University of Akron. We also have Elizabeth Olin here from Kent State University, and she'll be here to touch on what Kent State offers on their campuses, their main campus, their START campus, and then a class that we're going to be offering here at Springfield through Kent State Stark. And then Ryan Palmer is here from Stark State College. So he'll be able to address what's particular about that school. So if you have any questions, we'll save them till the end, but welcome Greg Deringer. Thank you for coming.
Okay, so welcome everybody. As Melinda said, my name is Greg Deringer. I'm the director of the College Credit Plus program for the University of Akron. So for my presentation, I'll actually kind of break it into 2 parts. So the first part will just be general information about College Credit Plus, and then as I finish up, I'll transition and talk specifically about the application process, requirements, and then some of the course opportunities that we have through the University of Akron for you. Well, let's start with a little bit of background of what the College Credit Plus program is. As Melinda said, College Credit Plus actually replaced what used to be called the Post-Secondary Enrollment Options Program, and I think we're kind of finding now that a lot of families aren't as familiar with that terminology because College Credit Plus, or CCP that we'll refer to this evening, actually replaced the post-secondary program back in 2015 and 16. So it's now been going into its actually 7th year of the new legislation for College Credit Plus. But basically what the state of Ohio did with this program is they kind of revamped some of the rules and policies regarding post-secondary, and one of the key things that they did was they expanded the opportunity for students as early as in 7th and 8th grade. Prior to that, the old post-secondary program only allowed high school students, so in grades 9 through 12, to participate in the program. I will give you basically the reality check here, though, that even though the program is available to students in the 7th and 8th grade, there are very few middle school students who actually participate. At all of our higher ed institutions, so Akron, Kent State Stark, Kent State, Stark State College, the majority of our students are high school students, and it's really even skewed more towards even juniors and seniors in high school, and then it kind of trickles down from there for some freshmen and sophomore students in high school. But if students meet eligibility as a middle schooler, they can participate if they meet those requirements, which you'll hear about those in a moment here. The big advantage of the program, though, is oftentimes we're going to refer to this as a dual credit program because the student will be taking college classes through one of our colleges or universities. So they're getting college credit on a college transcript, and then those credits transfer back to the school district and also count and apply towards high school credits. So that's why it's referred to as a dual credit program. With that dual credit option, that is also a state-funded option, so tuition and fees for the student's enrollment is actually paid for through state funding, and textbooks, since you're attending a public school here at Springfield, your textbooks are actually paid for and purchased by the school district. So out of pocket for tuition fees, textbooks, those are going to be covered 100% through the student's participation, although we will talk about some potential financial ramifications here in just a moment. Before we do that, though, let's talk about, there are 2 different options. So the option that I just referred to, which is the dual credit option, is option B, which it's, I never understood this, so you would think that option A would be the first option, which would be the dual credit option, but for whatever reason, the state determined the dual credit option is option B. Option A is a self-pay option, so that if a student wants to, the student and their family can actually pay out of pocket for the tuition and fees for their classes as well as textbooks. One of the primary reasons a student may want to do that is because under option B, the courses and the grades are going to count both for college credit and high school credit. Is if you do option A, you can choose to have that count for college credit only, and then it doesn't get factored back into the high school GPA. I can definitively tell you, and I'll have Ryan and Elizabeth chime in here, we have never in the existence of the CCP program had a student request option A. Is that the case at your institutions as well? Yep. Yep.
Let them request option A if they've gone over credits.
If they've gone over credits, which we're going to, we'll talk about that in a moment. But typically up front, usually that's not the case, that a student right away from the inception of their enrollment in the program isn't going to automatically say, yes, I want to do option A. But we will talk about credit limits here in a moment because that is a potential way that a student might have some financial responsibility. Before we talk more about finances, though, let's talk about advantages. So what's the advantage of doing the College Credit Plus program? From an academic perspective, probably the biggest benefit to students is the ability to take college courses and get those credits done and out of the way can definitely help students to stay on track towards their future college degree. And when I always talk to our incoming new students, one of the things that I stress is, if your ultimate goal is to go on and complete a bachelor's degree, oftentimes we talk about degrees in the number of years that they take. So a bachelor's degree, oftentimes we refer to it as a 4-year degree. An associate's degree, we refer to that as a 2-year degree. But think about your personal experiences of either yourself or other family members and friends that when they attended college, not everybody graduates with their bachelor's degree straight through in 4 years, or their associate's degree in 2 years. So when you do CCP, minimally, it might help you to stay on track towards completion of your degree, or it might even jumpstart you ahead so that you can get even more credits done and out of the way. At all of our institutions, I know we are having students now that are actually completing an associate's degree at the same time as they're graduating from high school. That's actually 60 credits to earn an associate's degree. At the University of Akron this spring, we have the first student in the history of College Credit Plus that actually is going to be completing a bachelor's degree at the same time as he's graduating this spring. Now that's rare. In our program at Akron, when I look at our data for our students, average number of credits that the students are completing at the time of high school graduation is right around about 18 total credits. So that's the equivalent of a little bit more than one full college semester. So that's going to illustrate then that in most cases, students are usually only taking 1 or 2 classes a semester here and there. So it's not, most students that are not on a full-time schedule where they're taking all college classes only. But it just depends on what your interests are, what you want to do. Each of our institutions, we're going to work with you so you can kind of tailor make and custom, your experience in the College Credit Plus program so that it can help you to get further ahead. And then some other advantages. Obviously, when you're taking college classes, you may be able to take new and different classes that you don't have available right here at Springfield High School. So the sky's the limit as far as what the options might be. Now let's go back to those fees for a moment here. So under option B, tuition fees, textbooks are paid for. There are some potential expenses though. So I'm going to skip down to the bottom first and talk about parking. If you are attending a college or university and you're driving to their campus and they do charge for parking, so I know at the University of Akron, the Akron campus, we do charge for parking. Kent State, the main campus in Kent, does charge for parking. So if you're looking at Akron or Kent and you're going to be taking classes on our campuses, you would be responsible for paying for parking. That's one of the few expenses that is unfortunately not covered by CCP. So that's one of the only ones that would be required up front. Some other potential expenses, though, could be incurred if the student withdraws from a class after the drop period or if they fail a class. Based on the state guidelines, if a CCP student fails a course, they're required to reimburse their school district the amount of state funds that contributed towards their funding for participation. Now, good news is those don't happen a lot, but those are some potential expenses there. And then we're going to talk about funding limits here in a little bit, which Elizabeth mentioned. If a student does exceed the total number of hours that they can have funded through the College Credit Plus program, that's another example where they might have to self-pay for some courses. But in general, most of your experience in the program is going to be fully funded. Some important dates and deadlines. So this is probably one of the most important dates that you do need to keep in mind. The state does require by April 1st that any CCP student that is interested, or I should say any student who's interested in CCP is required by April 1st to complete what's called the intent to participate form or letter of intent. I think that was actually handed out to you by your counselors when you checked in this evening. So that form is simply just you're acknowledging to Springfield schools that you're interested in College Credit Plus. It doesn't require that if you turn in that form that it's absolutely mandatory that you have to participate in the program. It's just that this is a state requirement, so you still have time to decide if you're going to participate or not. But you do have to have that form on file by April 1st, because what happens is if you don't have that form on file, the district can actually deny your participation for the entire upcoming academic year. So this is one of the most key forms that does have to be turned in. That goes only to the high school. It's not required by the colleges, universities, so it's kind of separate from the application process that we're going to talk about here in a moment for the universities. So that's a school-specific form, has to be turned in by April 1st. So how can a student participate then? So that's kind of your pre-step, is turning in that intent form to the school. But the next steps are going to be how you're determined eligible to participate by the state and then by the universities. So your first step really in the process is eligibility. So the state of Ohio has guidelines that kind of govern how a student is determined eligible to participate in CCP. Typically, that has been by some type of a standardized test score. So that could be the ACT or SAT test, which actually I'll go right to the next slide here. Could be ACT or SAT. Could be placement testing through the different universities. So for example, I know at Stark, they'll allow their placement examinations. But in addition to that, the state does have a new rule that is actually going to be coming out in February. So I know all of our institutions, we've kind of got ahead of this, that will allow students to be determined eligible also based on their high school GPA. So that guideline is going to stipulate that as long as a student has a 3.0 high school GPA, they're going to be eligible as well as if they want to take the placement testing or standardized test. So at most of our institutions, it's going to be either or. We can determine eligibility either by your high school GPA or by some type of a standardized test. So you'll see that information from each of the universities then. So you're meeting your eligibility based on either that GPA or test scores. And then the next step in the process is you do need to formally apply to the college or university that you're going to be taking classes. Now, this is an important step here because at Springfield, you do have some classes on site actually by all three of our universities. So sometimes students forget, they turn in the intent form to the school, and then they forget that they have to apply for admission to the university. So please remember, you do have to apply. So if you want to take the classes that are offered through Akron, through Kent Stark, or through Stark State, you have to apply to all three of our universities to be admitted to our programs in order to take those college classes, even the ones that are on site here at the school. So that's the number one step in the process, is applying for admission. And pretty standard with all of our universities, that's going to be an online application that you're going to be able to complete on each of our websites. In addition to that, there's a brand new form that is required by all of the universities this year called a permission slip. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit here, but the permission slip is a form that does have to be signed by the student and a parent or guardian, which is acknowledging that the student is going to be enrolling in college classes, and those college classes could include some adult content or adult subject matter. So that form is going to be standard for any of the universities that the student applies to. And then also pretty standard, you will have to submit a high school transcript. And then again, test scores at our institutions is typically going to be optional. So if you have ACT or SAT scores, you want to turn those in as well. So each university might have their own set of kind of procedures that you're going to go through for that application process. Once you have applied to the college or university, they will send you an acceptance letter. And at each of the institutions, that next step in the process could be slightly different. At a lot of our universities, there is some type of an orientation that is required or a mandatory advising appointment. So you'll get those step-by-step instructions in the acceptance letter that you receive from that university, and that's then how you will register for classes. So that's a very important step in the process, is making sure that when you apply and you get that acceptance letter, read that very thoroughly, because it's going to provide you with those next steps. When you're applying, by the way, I know we stress to students, all of our institutions are going to require an email address for the student. Typically, what we recommend is that it's actually some type of a personal email address. I'm not sure at Springfield here or not. I know at some high schools, students cannot actually receive external emails outside of the Springfield school email. So if that's the case here at your school, students, you probably want to set up your own personal Gmail or other type of email account so that you can use that as you're going through the application process. And then the most important thing is you need to check that email. We find that students are struggling with not paying attention to their emails. That's how all of our universities are going to be communicating with you. So make sure that you are checking those emails. So that'll provide you with those instructions then on how you're going to register for classes. So that's the process. So you meet eligibility with the state, and then you're going to apply for admission to the universities. Just some other things that we'll run through here, just some, that you'll need to know based on state guidelines and rules. There are specific courses that students can and cannot take. This is actually a relatively new rule that the state put in place, I think, back in 2018. And what it stipulates is that for a brand new College Credit Plus student, in their first 15 credits, they may only take what are called Level 1 or allowable courses. So Level 1 courses may include transferable courses, which I'll come back to here in a moment, or they may also include any courses in subject areas which include computer science or information technology, anatomy and physiology, or foreign languages including sign language. So students can take any courses in those subject areas or transferable courses. So what's a transferable course? So all of our institutions that are represented tonight, so Akron, Kent, and Stark, we're all part of the state university system for the four-year public universities and community colleges throughout Ohio. So we all have classes at our universities that have transfer tags which guarantee that if you take English at any of our institutions, it'll transfer seamlessly to all of the other state universities and community colleges in Ohio. So the different kind of identifiers for those transferable courses, some courses are flagged as what are called transfer module courses. Those are oftentimes at our universities called general education or core requirements. So those are the basic classes like English and math and science that you're going to find at any of the universities. But there also may be what are called transfer assurance guide or tag courses. Those are courses in a specific college major that are guaranteed to transfer within all of the different state universities and community colleges. And then we also may have some classes that are called C-tag courses, which are career and technical courses, which also are guaranteed to transfer. So those are the courses that students have to choose from within their first 15 credits. Now, there are some exceptions surrounding those, but for the most part, those are going to be the classes or the subject areas that students are permitted to take. Once a student has completed 15 credits, then it's sky's the limit, and as long as the students have completed the necessary introductory courses or have completed the necessary placement requirements, they can take any upper level courses if they're not in that level 1 first 15 credit category. Now, there are some non-allowable courses, though, too. And by non-allowable, these are courses that the state will not fund. So regardless of if the student has completed 15 credits or not, the state will not pay for any one-on-one privately instructed courses. They will also not pay for phys ed courses or remedial courses. Remedial courses are basic or developmental courses, oftentimes in writing, reading, or math that don't count for college credit. So that's kind of an easy one there. The whole premise of the College Credit Plus program is the student is taking a college level course that they get college credit for. So a remedial course, since it doesn't count for college credit, is not going to be applicable and funded by the state then. So students, however, can have the option sometimes, depending on the university, to self-pay. So I guess this would be kind of that option A category. If a student did want to take a one-on-one privately instructed course, for example, at Akron, we do have some students that they request to take private music lessons. So maybe they want to take guitar lessons through our School of Music. That's one-on-one. It's not covered for CCC funding, so the student and their family have to self-pay for that type of course. We have had some students also request to self-pay for phys ed. Doesn't make sense to do that, though, and here is why. Let me see a show of hands. Do we have any parents that are alums of the University of Akron in our audience tonight? Okay. Who took phys ed as an Akron student? Yeah, all of us, right? I'm an Akron alum, too. Guess what? Akron, nor any of the state universities in Ohio, require phys ed any longer. So if you wanted to even self-pay for a phys ed class, doesn't make sense to do it because it's not going to count towards your requirements that are really needed for graduation at the college level. So we've had a couple students request that, but pretty much we deny that now because it's not going to really count towards anything towards the future college credits for that student then. So each student's going to work case by case with a college advisor who will help them with those decisions then. Now, as far as class selection, so I talked broadly about some the allowable courses, but here are a lot of the subject areas that students in CCP take courses from. So a lot of the social sciences like government, psychology, sociology, U.S. history. Students also, the #1 enrolled class in College Credit Plus throughout the entire state of Ohio is English. That's the #1 subject area that students typically are taking. But then we also have students taking foreign language classes, math courses, science courses. So again, the only limitations are you have to start with the level 1 courses, and then you have to meet the placement requirements for those different subject areas. So wide variety of subjects. And if students do know what college major they want to go into, they can work very closely with their college advisor, and we can help to guide them so that they're choosing the appropriate classes that are going to apply towards that specific degree program. Here's that mature subject matter that I mentioned earlier. So as part of the application process, you will have to complete that permission slip that goes to the college or university. And then students, also after they are admitted, there's a short questionnaire, just 2 questions on it that the student only has to complete. And it's acknowledging that they have the maturity and the responsibility to be taking college level courses. So this is a brand new rule that just went into effect this past October. The grades for students, very important to remember when you're enrolled under option B, the dual credit option. The grades that you earn on your college transcript transfer right back to the high school and are calculated into the high school GPA. When a student participates in CCP, though, they may be able to get a little bit of an advantage in their grade point average because if the school has weighted grades for advanced placement, international baccalaureate, or even sometimes schools will weight honors classes at the high school level, if you take a CCP course in that same subject area, you also get a weighted grade when that transfers back to your high school and is calculated into your high school GPA. So that's important sometimes to students if they're trying to be in top 10% of their class or vying for valedictorian or whatever that those extra kind of recognition might be through the high school, you will get a little bit of an advantage when you do CCP. Academic policy here, also related to grades. At all times, a College Credit Plus student is required to maintain at least a 2.0 grade point average, so that's a C average, in their college classes. If a CCP student does fall below a 2.0, they are placed on what's called probation. So based on the state rules, a CCP student that is on probation is still eligible to continue to take classes the following semester. However, that following semester, they're limited to just 1 class, and if the previous semester they earned any grades of D or F, that 1 class the following semester can't be in the same subject area that they earned a grade of D or F. So the state is pretty restrictive with this requirement, but really what they're trying to do is to ensure, because you do have those grades applied right to your high school transcript, they're trying to ensure that the students aren't going to negatively impact their high school GPA or even impact the ability to graduate on time. So this is a very strict requirement. It's a state guideline, so all of our universities do have to adhere to this then. Okay. CCP Credit Limit. So this is what we were referring to earlier when we were talking about option A, where a student might have to self-pay. So there is a maximum number of credits that a CCP student is eligible to take within a year. So each year, that maximum number of credits is 30, and throughout the student's entire participation in CCP, they may only take up to 120 total credits, which is the equivalent of a bachelor's degree. So when we calculate that limit, though, it's not just college credits, it also includes high school credits. So here's the conversion of credits. Any college course that a student takes through CCP, if it is 3 or more credits, and typically at our institutions, most of the college classes are usually 3, but there are some 4 credit, and even at some universities there are some 5 credit courses. So any course that's 3 or more, when that transfers back to the high school, that fulfills 1 full high school credit. So as you see in this slide here in the middle of the slide, if a student takes English composition, for example, that's a 3 credit hour class. When that transfers back to the high school, that fulfills 1 full credit or for 1 full year of high school English. So at all of our institutions, if students then take the second semester of English, That actually is another 3 credits. So by taking 2 college courses, the student will have then fulfilled 2 full years of English credit back at the school. So if students take English in their junior year through CCP, they take both semesters, they have their junior and senior year of English done and out of the way then. So you get a little bit of an advantage also based on the accumulation of the credits because of that conversion. Now, let's talk about that 30 credit limit a little bit more here, because most CCP students will have a split schedule where they have some college classes and then some high school classes. So that's how we have to convert the credits back and forth. So the reverse conversion is any high school course that's worth 1 full credit, that's the equivalent of 3 college credits. So we just flip that equation there to calculate that. So in this blue box here, I have an example. So let's say the upcoming school year, student's going to take 5 full high school credits. To equate that to college credits, you simply multiply it by 3, so 5 times 3 is 15. 30 credits is the maximum that the state will fund each year for CCP participation. So if that student already has 15 credits just through the high school, you simply subtract 15 from 30. And in this example, the student would then have 15 total credits that they have available for their participation for the upcoming year. The upcoming year, by the way, actually starts in the summer. The state does allow students to take summer classes, followed then by the fall and the spring semesters. So the spring is always the end of the funding year for CCP. Even though students can start in the summer, I'll throw a caution out there. Remember that those are calculated into the limit, so sometimes we have students, if they take too many classes in the summer, they run out of their credits by the time they get to the spring semester at the end of the year. Also, another thing to keep in mind with summer is that it is much more accelerated. At each of our universities, typically the summer sessions might be 5 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks at the most. So it's still the same amount of course content that they would have during a regular semester, but it's compacted into that shorter time frame. So you'd want to keep that in mind if you are thinking about summer. If a student does exceed their 30 credit limit, though, that's where that self-pay option could come into play. We do, at all of our institutions, I'm sure we've had this happen where a student, they get over the 30 credit limit, they still want to take the college class, so the student and their family decides that they want to self-pay. When a student self-pays, though, it is going to be at the regular tuition rate for that university that they're taking the class through. So you do want to keep that in mind. We work very closely with your counselors at the school, though, to kind of track and monitor that limit. So we usually know way in advance if that's going to be an issue, and then the student usually will just make schedule adjustments so that they can work around that then. Okay, so options after high school. So I talked about the advantages back at the beginning of the presentation. So the big advantage is you're accumulating some college credits, which is going to help you get further ahead towards a future degree program. At each of our institutions, if you stay at the same university that you've done College Credit Plus, your transcript is already started, so it just continues right along. At all of our institutions, though, I do know that you do have to reapply in your senior year of high school because you're then changing your status from a College Credit Plus student to a degree-seeking student. So that is going to be a standard process in the senior year when a student is doing CCP. But if you stay at the same institution, you have already started your transcript. Based on the state rules, for all of the state universities and community colleges, even though the student has accumulated credits through CCP, they are still considered, I'm going to make air quotes here, a new freshman, so that the student is not excluded from scholarship opportunities or selective programs like honors colleges or honors programs at the different state universities. Now that's the state universities and community colleges. Private colleges and universities can make their own policies, but because this is a state program, most of the private schools in Ohio are pretty flexible with that process too and still consider students new freshmen. Now, speaking of other universities though, please remember when you do CCP, it is the start of your college transcript. So again, if you stay at the same university, it just continues right along. If you're applying to any other colleges, universities though, it's very important when you apply to those schools, you're going to need to note on those applications that you have done College Credit Plus and then list any and all of the universities that you are earning credit through CCP. And then eventually you're going to need to send an official college transcript from that university to the new institution. When that university receives the transcript, it's up to them to evaluate it, determine how the credits will transfer, and more importantly, determine how those credits may apply. So transferability versus applicability. And that's very important because when your credits transfer, they could apply as a general or a core requirement. They could apply as a required course for an intended major, or they could apply as an elective credit. So when I was talking about phys ed earlier, for example, if you took a phys ed class and self-paid for it, it's probably only going to count as an elective credit at any of the other institutions because they're not going to have that as a requirement towards graduation. So you really want to be kind of strategic and thinking ahead about what courses you're taking and how they may apply to your future goals. So I'll show you real quick here 2 websites. First website is transfercredit.ohio.gov. This is actually a website in the state of Ohio specifically for the state universities and the community colleges. So you can use this to check and see how your credits will transfer from any of the state schools and community colleges. So what I've done in this example is at the top, student is attending the University of Akron, select the subject area of English composition, and then transferring to Ohio State. So when you hit search, it's going to show us the results here, and that's probably really tiny for everybody to read that. But the left-hand side of the slide is our English courses at the University of Akron, and then the right-hand side are the equivalent English courses at Ohio State. So what this is showing you is course per course. If you take English at the University of Akron, it will transfer directly to Ohio State, and those are the equivalent courses. And there's even a little note in the middle that says, we'll transfer and apply as general education credit. So when I was talking about the level 1 courses, English, by the way, happens to be what's called a transfer module course, which is guaranteed transfers all throughout the state to any of the state universities. So you can use this website for all 13 of the state universities, and then, forget off the top of my head, how many community colleges in Ohio, Ryan? Do you remember off the top of your head? 13 or 14. For 13 or 14, so it's about the same number for both the state universities as well as the community colleges then. So we're all on this transfercredit.ohio.gov website then. Now, in addition to this website, you can also use transferology.com. So differences between the websites, the state website, you can go right to it and start searching. Transferology, the first thing that the student has to do is create an account or a profile. Once they've created that, they can go in and use it very similarly to the state website. Transferology is much more comprehensive though, because not only does it include state schools and community colleges, it includes private schools and out-of-state schools. So many, many more institutions are included on Transferology. It operates in exactly the same way. I kind of skipped the steps here, but just showing you the results here. So I use the same example, student attending Akron, transferring to Ohio State, and guess what? It shows us the same results that we saw on the state website as well. But my advice to you, though, is even though you can use these websites to kind of check on transfer of credits on your own, it still is very good to call any college or universities that you're considering just to find out what their transfer policies are. Luckily in Ohio, even our private schools are pretty flexible. I'll give you 2 exceptions, though. Case Western Reserve and the College of Worcester are a little bit more restrictive on what credits they will take. For example, both of their institutions have policies that if you take CCP classes on site at your high school, they will not accept them for transfer. So you want to be very educated and know what the policies of any universities might be. Out of state especially, get on the phone and call admissions offices. I have seen the full spectrum for out-of-state schools. Some schools have accepted 100% of the credits that the student has accumulated. Some schools have accepted none of the credits that the student has accumulated. So you want to be very educated and know up front so that you're not learning of that, in your senior year after you've already accumulated, however many semesters worth of credits only to find out that they won't transfer. Okay? So that's it for the general presentation. So I'm going to transition real quick here and talk about the University of Akron, and then I'm going to pass it off to Elizabeth next to talk about Kent State. So as far as the University of Akron, lots of options for you to take classes. So one of the things that you have a unique option for right here at Springfield High School is you have a distance learning classroom that is connected live and in real time to the University of Akron. So historically, that has been how most of the Springfield students have taken classes through Akron, although we do have some classes or some students that are coming to campus to take classes, and then more prevalent over the last couple of years now have been online classes that students can take. So a variety of options for you to take classes as a Springfield High School student. Now specifically the distance learning classes, Those are live and in real time, so the student actually is taking the class in the distance learning classroom here at the school. The class is actually instructed on the University of Akron campus, and typically we're connected to other high schools at the same time. So students are able to have that live interaction, so it's kind of like the next best thing to not being on campus in person to take that class. Here are the different course offerings that we have typically from year to year for distance learning. In addition to the distance learning classes, by the way, English composition is instructed in person here at Springfield High School. Mrs. Humanansky has taught that for several years. So if students are looking for that option for the face-to-face in person, she is offering English composition here at the school in person. So lots of different options as far as classes. As far as the admissions requirements, so we talked about eligibility earlier. So for the University of Akron, we will be following the new guidelines that are coming out in February. So students can qualify either based on GPA or by completion of the ACT or SAT test. So if it is by GPA, students will have to have at least a 3.0, and it's an unweighted cumulative high school GPA. Let me say that clearly. High school GPA. We're still waiting on the final guidance from the state, but the way it's written, it does say high school GPA. So a middle schooler then, really the only way they could qualify by GPA would be if they have taken high school courses in middle school, which Mrs. Weekland, do students in Springfield, are they able to take algebra or any other high school credits in junior high?
Yes. Well, our 8th graders can take algebra 1.
Okay, so it is possible that an 8th grader might have a high school GPA, but if they don't, then it's going to default, as well as if it's a high schooler that doesn't have a 3.0, they would have to take the ACT or SAT to meet one of the other readiness standards established by the state. Those readiness standards include either an 18 English score on the ACT test, or a 22 reading score, or 22 math score. They have to have one of those three if they don't qualify based on GPA. Very important to note, if a student is applying to any of our universities and they are not taking the ACT or SAT, most likely they're going to have to take some type of placement testing, though, after admission, because the placement testing is still going to be necessary to determine a placement and assessment into specific subject areas. So they're going to need it for English, they're going to need it for social sciences, they're going to need it for math. So if the student doesn't do ACT or SAT, they're going to do a placement test through the university after admission. Okay. Application process, and I mentioned this earlier, pretty standard for all of the universities. Number one most important thing is completion of the online application for admission. In addition to that, we would need high school transcripts or report cards if the student is a middle school student. And then for the University of Akron, we do have our separate signature page and permission slip. So the permission slip is the state form. The signature page requires a student, parent, and a counselor signature. So actually the permission slip and signature page, you find those in the same location online, so you just make sure that you need to print both of those pages. And then students, if they prefer to take ACT or SAT, we still would encourage that, because it is going to give them then test scores in all of the different subject areas that they might need for placement, but it is optional. An application deadline for both the summer and fall semesters for the University of Akron is April 15th. So that's your target. The number one most important thing for that deadline is completing the online application. We will collect additional credentials after that date, but the online application has to be submitted by that April 15th date. For students that do still want to take ACT or SAT, these are going to be the recommended dates then. So for summer and fall admission, the last ACT that will be accepted by the University of Akron is the April 2nd National ACT, so that registration deadline is coming up next month on February 25th. And then students, if they prefer to take the SAT test, March 12th would be the National SAT, so that would be a target date for that test. If for whatever reason a student still wants to test and they have conflicts with the national testing dates, we administer the ACT on our campus, and you can just call our testing center and schedule an individual administration. If the student takes that ACT, though, it is only for use at the University of Akron and cannot be sent to other universities. The national ACT and SAT can be sent to other schools. And then lastly, let me see a show of hands. Do we have any juniors that are in the audience, that you're a junior right now? So juniors, you will be taking the ACT here at the school. It's probably coming up in actually in February or March. So you already have ACT scores because you'll be taking it through the school then. So we can use those for placement purposes for you. Okay. After a student then, they apply. If they're doing testing, we get all those credentials. Our admissions office will evaluate all of those materials, and those students who meet the requirements will be admitted. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is the most important step. When you get that acceptance letter, please take action. It is going to direct you to complete what's called your confirmation. Once you have completed the confirmation, that triggers then that the student will get assigned to an orientation. All of our CCP students at Akron must attend an orientation, and the most important thing that takes place at that is that you actually meet with an advisor and register for classes. So the sooner you apply, the sooner you get admitted, the sooner you complete the confirmation, the sooner you're going to attend orientation. Our orientation programs start actually in mid-May and then run throughout the summer. So you don't want to attend one of the late ones in the summer in August. You want to get there as soon as you possibly can. And then other general information, we always stress to students that when you're taking the college classes, other than the English course that's instructed in person here at Springfield, all other classes will follow the University of Akron's calendar and schedule, which may be slightly different than the high school calendar. One of the big ones is the start of the school year. Typically, you guys will start in mid-August. We always start in late August. So usually there's a gap of a week to maybe a week and a half between you've already started at the high school and we haven't started yet at the university. But then we finish earlier in the spring. This year we have a very early finish. It's the first full week in May is our last week of classes at the university. So calendars may be slightly different. Attendance is expected and mandatory just like it is in your high school classes. Grades, very different. At the high school, you have a 9-week grading period. At each of our institutions, our only official grades are the final grades at the end of the semester. Even though you're going to get grades and tests all throughout the semester, the only ones that are officially reported are the final grades at the end of the year, or end of the semester. And if students ever need help, we do offer free tutoring. So that's both in person on our campuses as well as e-tutoring that is online. So students can get any academic assistance they might need. And then lastly, contact information. I'm Greg Deringer, the director of the program. Greg Landis, the first Greg, I don't know if that makes it easier or more confusing, but if you call the university and ask for Greg with CCP, you'll get one of the two of us and we'll be happy to help you out there. But Greg is your point person as you're going through the admissions process. All of the information, by the way, that regarding admissions and enrollment was on that checklist handout that was out on the table when you came in this evening. So I'm going to actually transition here and pass it over to Elizabeth to talk about Kent State and Kent State Stark. And then we will wrap it up with Ryan from Stark State. So Elizabeth, it's all yours.
Hi everyone, as Greg said, my name is Elizabeth. I am the Academic Program Coordinator for College Credit Plus at our North Canton campus, the Stark campus. But the information I'm going to cover is going to be the same for our Kent location, or as most people call it, our main campus. The only difference between our campuses is our class size. So the Stark campus has about a 17-to-1 class size ratio. The Kent campus is about 30-to-1, so students to instructor. So we have a little bit smaller of a class size at our campus, but the classes are the same, the rigor is the same, and the expectation is the same. So for College Credit Plus, our process is very similar to Greg's at the University of Akron. So your first step is going to be to complete our online application, which is at kent.edu/CCP. That's going to be a really short application. It's going to ask you maybe 10 questions. You're also going to be able to give us your school counselor's information so they can send us your transcripts. And then you will give us any test scores, so ACT or SAT. And then we also offer what's known as the Accuplacer Assessment, which is something that the University of Akron does not. But I do know that Stark State does. So it is a reading, writing assessment. I believe Stark State also offers the math version, but Kent State does not. So it assesses you on reading and writing or math. And it gives us test scores that are ranked by the state as to what is allowable for CCP eligibility. Typically, a reading score would be a 250, a writing score would be a 5, and I will defer to Ryan for the math score. So since we don't offer the math placement, that's not something that I keep readily available in my brain. And then the last piece of our admissions process is that permission form. So just like the University of Akron, we have a 2-page form. So both pages of the form are signed by the student and their guardian. It is going over the state required information about maturity and content in classes. It is very, very important that you meet our application deadlines. So our summer deadline is the same as the University of Akron's. It's April 15th. We have a little bit of an extension with our fall deadline, which would close on June 1st. And then if you wanted to wait to participate until the spring semester, we have an October 15th deadline for that. All of this information is also on our website. I also have some handouts if you want them later. And then after you are admitted to Kent State, you will complete our orientation. Our orientation is 2 parts. You only complete both parts if you are coming to campus or doing an online course. If you are only taking our math course that is here in the building, it's Algebra for Calculus, you will just complete our first part, which is our online orientation modules. They take less than an hour to complete, but they are required for you to complete them before I'm able to help you add your class. And then if you want to come and do on-campus or online classes, which is an option for you, you would do an in-person orientation with us, and that would be when you would meet with an academic advisor and you would enroll in your campus-based courses. So very similar to the way Akron completes their process. Our orientations will be in May for summer and in June for our fall students. So it's really important, like Greg was saying, that you pay attention to the email that you use on your application, because that's where we're going to contact you and we're going to tell you first and foremost, congratulations, you've been admitted. And then secondly, here's your next steps. So make sure you always read emails that come from us very carefully so that you don't miss any steps in the process. If you have questions, that's what we're here for throughout the whole process. So feel free to reach out to any of us during your application and admissions process so we can help you. And then this is my contact information. Like I said, this process is the same for the Kent campus as well. So it's all the same. It's just a matter of which location you may be traveling to if you want to do on-campus classes. I will turn it over to Ryan. Does Ryan have a PowerPoint slide? Sorry, I couldn't remember if we found it.
One second. Maybe.
It's
Or is this hers?
There's a lot of info they've already had, so.
Okay. Yeah, this looks like it's a general one. Okay.
My slide would have just been more information to overload you. My name's Ryan Palmer. I work for Stark State College. For those that are not familiar with where our location is, our main campus is in North Canton. If you're familiar with the shopping area called the Strip or the movie theater that's right there, our campus is right behind that. That's our main campus. That's where my office is, and it's also where the CCP staff office is. We also have a large new building right off of Route 8 in downtown Canton. So you might have seen that before. That's our Akron campus. Those are the 2 main buildings that you would attend classes in if you chose to take classes outside of your high school, or if you didn't want to go online and you wanted to be face-to-face, you would probably be in one of those 2 buildings. We do have campuses in Barberton and Alliance and downtown Canton, but those are really specific to things like welding or pipeline and gas, things like that, so you probably wouldn't wind up there. At Stark State, I work with a staff of about 6 other people, and we are dedicated to do nothing but College Credit Plus. So every student that I advise and every parent that I talk to, it has to do with CCP. We work with over 3,000 CCP students at Stark State and almost 100 different high schools in the state of Ohio. So we have students all the way from northern, southern, every reach of Ohio, we have a student at a school somewhere there. Our application dates, if you're taking notes, our application dates for the summer and the fall are May 1st to apply by, And for the spring semester, it's November 1st. To be honest, we don't stay by those deadlines all that hard. We're pretty flexible with students who make up their mind to do CCP kind of at the last minute. So if you write that down, that deadline, and you decide later on that you actually do want to participate in CCP and take some classes, we will do everything we can to work with you. And real quickly, if anyone is taking notes on the test scores, we abide by the state of Ohio's standards for eligibility, and that's ACT English of an 18 and ACT reading and math of a 22. And with the Accuplacer, it's writing of a 5, reading of a 250, and the math is a 263. I imagine that for 90% of you, those numbers went in one ear and out the other. Really don't think about it too hard. There's a lot for you to absorb right now, but if you were taking notes, I just want to make sure that you had that information. I do want to also point out that Stark State is an open access institution, as many community colleges are, and what that term means is that we typically, for our students, do not worry about test scores for acceptance. A student need only work through the application process, so that's apply, get us your transcripts and test scores, and it doesn't necessarily matter what those test scores are. As an open access institution, we will accept you no matter what those scores are. That became kind of an issue with CCP because the state of Ohio was saying to students, hey, if you want to participate in CCP, you have to have these certain test scores. And we, as an open access institution, went to the state and said, hey, look, this is actually precluding a lot of students who would otherwise have been eligible to be Stark State students from participating. So we have a waiver that is in place that meets students in certain criteria. And there's 3 big ones. It is first-generation college student, if the student is on free or reduced lunch, or if they are minority status. If the student meets one of those criteria, we are able to waive the test score requirement. So for anyone who is in here and you have actually taken the ACT or maybe you've done the Accuplacer and you didn't have a great day, that's totally normal. We know that happens. At Stark State, there are opportunities where we could potentially push you through, make you eligible for CCP, despite what those scores are. So no matter what your score is, make sure you talk to us. We can kind of work out where you fit in and what would be the best fit for you. I also want to point out that at Stark State, the CCP students with us do typically pursue these general education classes. That is the most common. Taking English, taking math, taking science, it's a great combination. It meets your high school requirements. They're classes you know you're going to need for a bachelor's degree along the way. Maybe you get a weighted grade for it. You can do them faster. They're free. There's a lot of good reasons to do general education courses through the CCP program. But I also want to make sure that everyone knows that while that's the most common, that doesn't mean that you can't take other classes that the colleges provide. And at Stark State, we have a lot of classes in the trades. So those are classes like welding, HVAC, automotive. We have classes in phlebotomy, which is drawing blood. We have classes in medical coding, lab tech, things like that. Classes that you might not automatically associate with the College Credit Plus program, but they're college courses that you would be eligible to take while you're still in high school, and they are excellent classes to take if you are looking to enter the workforce right out of high school, or maybe you just want to get some sort of part-time work that looks good on a resume that you can be doing while you go to school part-time as well. Stark State has a whole slew of classes that work like that. And we also have a number of employee partners who are looking to hire students right out of high school who have some experience in those areas too. So while most of what you've heard tonight is take your general classes, take an English, take a math and a science, and certainly that's probably what most of you are here to learn about, also be thinking about some of the classes that you could take that could help you earn a credential and get a job right out of high school as well. So keep that in the back of your mind, and I'm glad to answer any questions about that along the way. And I will close by just saying that if you forget everything that the 3 of us have said tonight, remember one thing, the April 1st deadline. That's really the only thing that you should walk away having firmly in your brain right now, is fill out that intent to participate letter, turn it in by April 1st, and then start to worry about, okay, what do I do next? Which college do I choose? Which classes do I want to do? Where can I take the Accuplacer? What's my ACT score? Start worrying about all of that after you've turned that intent to participate letter in. And I am the closer for tonight. So I think at this point, I'll turn it over.
I do have a microphone, and I'm echoing. Does anybody have any questions for any of our experts? I have a microphone, and I can walk around. Okay, hold on one second.
So my son's in 8th grade, and I kind of basically heard you, but is it best to do the ACT or SAT for him since they won't do the GPA, or is it best to have the evaluations done at the schools?
So student is currently in 8th grade, is that correct?
Yes, he's in 8th grade right now.
Yeah, we are still waiting on the final guidance from the state. Basically, the whole CCP program is, actually I'll take my mask off, it's legislated. So any new rules that come out, they are actually passed by the Ohio legislature, and then they go through the process. So the new rules are going to be effective actually in a couple weeks coming up in February. We'll know a little bit more at that time. Again, the way it's written right now, it does say high school GPA. I don't know if there's going to be flexibility with that or not, so probably just hold off on that for a little bit. So if you're looking at Akron, for example, April 2nd ACT is acceptable. So give us a couple weeks to find out a little bit more about that, and we can kind of give you some guidance at that time. But I would say probably anticipate you're probably going to need ACT or SAT if you're looking at Akron. I can't speak for the
If
other
you're
schools.
looking for Kent State, we would have any 7th or 8th grader do the Accuplacer assessment with us. It's important to note that if you do take the Accuplacer with Stark State, we do interchange our test scores. So you can take a test with Stark State and send me the results and vice versa. But for 7th and 8th graders with Kent State, we will require that Accuplacer assessment because there is no high school GPA.
It's
That
worth
would be
it.
in that situation.
It's worth it to take the Accuplacer. The test is free, it's not timed, so it's a lot less stressful than maybe doing the ACT is. And even if the student just wants to take it to see where they're at, as an 8th grader, that could be a really helpful thing for them in making their decision moving forward. And even if a student does get admission to the school based on GPA alone, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to meet the prereqs for specific classes. So if a student wanted to take a math class, let's say, but they were admitted without a score and only their GPA, the college would in all likelihood say, that's great, welcome to the school, but our math class requires a really specific test score in math on the ACT or the Accuplacer. So whether or not you're getting in on GPA alone, I would still really recommend at least take the test so that you have some scores on file should you need them.
Can the test be taken any time, or do we have to do the application to the school, obviously?
So if, at least with Stark State, we could make the student a voucher for the test even without applying. The issue is just they would have a score that's kind of like floating out in nowhere until they've applied and we could actually log the score.
And we ask that students apply to Kent State before they do a test with us so that we don't have it floating out in test space.
Yes.
So that's the only reason for the application. And I think it's important to note that doing an application or doing a test with one of us doesn't mean that you have to participate with us. It's just giving you the option to do that. And so it's not going to hurt you to do an application and then take an assessment with one of us to see readiness.
Could I ask a question of the three of you, just because I've been a counselor here for a long time, percentage-wise, starting with grade 12 all the way down to grade 7, tell everybody who takes CCP classes percentage-wise.
It definitely, like the most are juniors and seniors, and then as you go down, the percentage of students also goes down. So very few 7th and 8th graders, a few more freshmen, a few more sophomores. I would say the bulk of my students, their first semester is actually their junior year. That does, I mean, and that could be, we're not trying to say like that's what's right for everyone, but that's just my experience. Most of the students are upperclassmen in high school when they start. And that might change as the program grows and becomes more popular too.
I think part of it is that students that have already completed a couple of years of high school feel more comfortable taking the college classes, but ours is identical. I can give you definitive percentages. It's about 65 to 70% are seniors, about 30 to 35% are juniors, and then it drops off from there. We probably have less than 10% freshmen and sophomores. We have about 2,000 students in our total program at Akron for all of our campuses. This year, I think I have 5 middle school students out of 2,000. So just to give you an idea of what you're looking at there for grade numbers.
So my campus alone with Kent State has about 1,000 CCP students, and I have 7 middle schoolers. So it's very low for the younger age students. And then we do see growth in our freshman and sophomore levels, but that's typically of classes that we have available to those grade levels that are embedded in their high school. So those students aren't often coming to campus unless they're an accelerated student. And then we do see primarily probably 60% of our students are juniors and seniors.
Thank you. I feel like that needs to be said because going through this, being a counselor here, a lot of people are like, yeah, I hear commonly, I'm just going to have them get those college classes out of the way. And it makes me shiver. Because as the high school counselor works with the CCP kids, we had a really hard year this year, didn't we, Greg? Fall semester, Mrs. Warner hit hard for a lot of our kids, you guys. We had a lot of D's and F's. And these are our top kiddos. And so I don't know what caused it, it could be a lot of things, but the kids that, you may think they're ready, but I caution you because I tell parents, not just the financial aspect of it, but the emotional aspect. There was a lot of tears shed in my office this year and every year of kids that are failing and end up on probation because that transcript goes with them through college. It affects their high school. But, I think you have to think about the maturity of the content, which I think you addressed, and then also what have they taken so far to get them ready? Have they taken Advanced English 9? Have they taken Advanced English 10? Have they taken any advanced classes that have rigor to them? Because not that you have to take those advanced classes to be successful, but what the teachers teach sometimes in those English classes, especially in 9th and 10th grade, is how to write a paper, how to annotate, how to do those things. And so if you haven't taken English 9 or 10 yet, those college professors don't care. They're going to want you to write a paper, they're going to want you to cite it, they're going to want you to annotate it, and they don't care that you're in 8th grade or that you're in 9th grade. They're going to have those expectations. And so I just throw caution. I see a lot of success from our kiddos. The majority of them are successful. But I say all the time, there's no sense in rushing. There's just no need to rush. It's going to be there. It's going to be there when your kid gets there. But most of our kids are seniors and then juniors. And I think I had a handful of 10th graders this year. I had 0 freshmen, 0 8th graders, 0 7th graders. And my 10th graders struggled.
Mrs. Weekman, I would two things to keep in mind here. So online classes. So where we've seen it probably at all of our institutions, all online classes are not the same. Some are synchronous, which are kind of like a distance learning class, where the students actually have designated days and times they meet via video conference. Students typically do okay in those classes. It's the asynchronous classes that do not have designated meeting days and times. We've learned a lot over this last year and a half now of being in the pandemic with so many classes being online. The biggest thing that I would stress, if students select an asynchronous class, they have to understand it is a huge time commitment. So you're still taking a 3-credit-hour class online. I've had students say to me, Mr. Derringer, I didn't know I'd have to spend 3 to 5 hours a week on that online class. Duh, it's a 3-credit-hour class. If it was meeting in person, you would be meeting 3 hours a week for that class. So you need to still have 3 hours available to view the lectures, read the work, and then do all your homework assignments and your papers. So that's a big one. Online classes are not all the same, asynchronous. It's a big time commitment. So we have lots and lots of students now that are requesting that because they think, oh, I'm just going to take that in addition to still taking all my high school classes and be involved in extracurricular activities, and it's been a recipe for failure. So take that into serious consideration. The other thing that Mrs. Weekman kind of clued me in there too is writing. You can expect in many of the college classes there is writing. So if English is not the student's favorite subject area, that's maybe a red flag already that there's going to maybe be some performance issues in college classes if you don't already have solid writing skills done and out of the way, because you can expect that, especially in social science classes, you can expect there's papers in addition to all the other assignments and quizzes and tests that the students will have. So in a government class, for example, they're going to have some type of paper that's involved. We have a Bach to Rock Exploring Music class. It has papers in it, even though the students are listening to music. So those are the things that kind of keep in mind that will help you kind of prepare for that.
I just want to touch on this little paper that we handed out, this College Credit Plus with the big barcode on it, this big scan mark. We need the students to join the Google Classroom. All the handouts that were provided tonight are going to be on there. We prefer everything to come back to us digitally. You have a letter of intent front and back in front of you. Hand it to your student. They know how to upload it onto Google Classroom. I don't know how to do it. You probably don't know how to do it. But your student knows how to do it. So we'll have them digitally so the kids can sign, and you can sign via the CAMI extension. A lot of kids like to do that. But if you have the paper copy front and back, give it to your student. They'll know how to upload it once they join the Google Classroom. But everything is going to be digital. So that way, the three of us can't lose it. Okay? Does anybody have any other questions as I walk around? Okay.
So like starting the beginning of next fall, I mean, my daughter's pretty excited and wants to do this, but last year showed us that when the school shut down and everything was remote, that's when her grades really did drop. So is there going to be any type of flexibility in case that would happen again? Because going forward to fall, if it's like a regular school year, she should be fine, but the unexpected does happen.
So for CCP, because it is in legislation, there are certain things that we have to stick to. And one of those is our modality and our semester length. So our classes are still expected, whether we were to need to go back to remote, to be 15 weeks and end at the same time. And the state allowed flexibility in CCP for students to drop classes or not have a class impact their GPA when the pandemic started. All of that has expired, and it has not been renewed by legislation. So at this time, there is not current flexibility for if a student were to enroll in a class outside of our add and drop deadlines. So we can have students enroll with us, and then until the second week of the semester, they can choose to remove that class from their schedule without any consequence. It's like the course never existed. But if you get past that second week and you're still in the class, that's when you would have some ramifications, either in completing the class and earning a low grade, or taking a W in the class, which is denoting that you failed to complete the course in totality and did not earn a grade. So that would be the only flexibility. In that type of situation, that's where I would tell a student to take the classes that are offered here in the school building, whether it be in the Akron Distance Learning Program or the physical in-person classes of the college writing and the math, because that's going to follow the school district. So if the school district is still in person, whether Kent State University goes remote or not, that class will still be taught here in person, following the school district's guidelines for COVID protocol. I don't know if that's helpful.
I would just add, we can't say anything definitively that we would never go back to full remote learning, but I think most of our campuses now are committed to doing as much in person as possible. The only exceptions to that are if students actually have an extended illness, if they would test positive for COVID themselves, then the instructors actually can record the classes and provide the course content if they are unable to physically attend the class. Those are the they're doing those exceptions on a case-by-case basis right now, but I don't think any of our institutions plan to go back to online like we did like last year during, when we were really in the thick of things with the pandemic. So again, can't say never, but I don't think that that's going to be a possibility. But students, I think, fine if there are issues. The biggest thing that I stress is they have to communicate. What unfortunately happens too often is that students get into some type of a situation, whether it's an illness or something that requires that they've missed class. They don't inform the professor, which is the first person that they should reach out to. So unfortunately, we find out after the fact that the student was ill and wasn't able to attend for a couple weeks, and then it's scrambling to see if the instructor is going to be able to provide some flexibility to allow them to make up stuff. So communication is key. That it helps oftentimes that the students will reach out to the counselors first, and then the counselors let us know. And we collaborate. Melinda and I probably email almost daily, I think. So we work very closely with your school.
So just for an example, here at Springfield High School, Mrs. Humanansky teaches English Comp 1 and 2, you mentioned, through the University of Akron. Next year, Lori Smith is going to be teaching Algebra for Calculus, and that'll be for our seniors. And that'll be through Kent State Stark. The reason I say for seniors is because of the sequence of math required before you get there. So we have Algebra 1, which is a tested subject, Geometry, which is a tested subject, Algebra 2, which is required to graduate in the state of Ohio, and then bam, that fourth math is going to fall into College Algebra for Calculus. We also have Jack Morgan. He teaches a medical terminology and anatomy through Stark State. And then in our, and that's typically seniors that will take that also. Sometimes juniors take it concurrently with advanced chemistry, because that is a requirement from our department here. So that typically is a fourth science for honors diploma, or for students who just are interested in going into the medical field and they want to take that class with Jack Morgan. We do have the distance learning lab. There's a schedule that Greg posted, but typically our students will take the intro to psychology. They'll take the government. So the government that's offered, we're thinking right now we may have a teacher here that's going to be teaching government through Kent Stark, possibly Mr. Bosco. I don't know if that's definitive yet, but he might be. If he's
It's finalized yet, they're reviewing it.
Yeah, they're reviewing him right now, so there's a possibility that our juniors, which need government, they need government to graduate, they can either take it with Mr. Bosco as a high school class, they can take it through CCP in the distance learning lab, and most of our kids that do CCP in 11th grade take the government in there, because you get it done in one semester. Or you can take it with Mr. Bosco if he gets approved through Kent State Stark. So there's going to be a lot of application things to keep clear. And then I'm trying to think, we've offered statistics in the distance learning lab. That's been a great math for kids. Intro to second semester, we have a speech class. We have economics. We have intro to ethics. Bach to Rock. Bach to Rock is always in person first semester. So there's a lot we can offer our kids here in this building, where they never have to leave to go on a college campus. We counselors work really well, and Mrs. Warner, to try to make the master schedule kind of lend itself. So when you're meeting with us to schedule, when your students are meeting with us starting in the next couple of weeks to schedule for next school year, we kind of need to know, are you planning on taking CCP? Because we're going to try to look at what classes you might be taking, so we can let Mrs. Warner know, so that if she has some power, she can try to, how many kids are going to be taking this class, and what else are they it's a jigsaw. I don't know how she does it. But trying to figure that out so it doesn't conflict with French or Spanish or band and all that other stuff. So, any other questions?
I think this is just for Akron, because yours said for Greg that it has to be a high school GPA. If my daughter has taken a couple high school classes, I mean, how many classes would she have had to take? Or does it have to be like a full semester?
Well, again, we're waiting on the final guidance from the state. So a high school GPA would be a high school GPA. So whatever would be counted in that the student completed.
Okay.
But we'll see the final kind of verbiage that comes up from the state in a couple of weeks here with that.
All right, thank you, Greg. Now, for Kent State and Stark,
So that would be the same with Kent State. So if she's taken even one high school class, she would have a GPA based on that one course. And we would use that as long as it was a 3.0 unweighted GPA. That's what the legislation that's going through the State House right now, that's the current verbiage. So if she had a 3.0 unweighted high school GPA, we would use that. It's the only time we would require test scores would be for a 7th or 8th grader who had not taken any high school level courses.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you guys for coming tonight. Remember, join the Google Classroom. We'll have everything on there. Contact your counselor if you have any other questions. Thank you for coming out tonight.